Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
I came home that evening expecting the same routine. A quiet dinner, maybe a few hours of TV, and then bed. But as soon as I stepped into the house, I felt it. Something was off. The air had changed, thick with anticipation. The sound of Daphne's heels clicked against the hardwood floor upstairs, quick and purposeful, like someone getting ready for something important. I put my keys down on the kitchen counter, my mind already spiraling with suspicion. She had mentioned a party earlier in the week, something at Sylvia's place. But why did this feel so different? I walked into the living room just as she appeared at the top of the staircase, dressed in a way that took my breath away, but not in the way it used to. Her black dress hugged her figure, perfectly accentuating every curve. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist, her makeup flawless, the red lipstick too bold, too unfamiliar. "Daphne," I called out, trying to mask the unease in my voice. She barely glanced at me as she descended the stairs, her eyes focused somewhere beyond me. "I told you I was going to Sylvia's party," she said, her tone casual but clipped. She reached for her purse on the side table, not bothering to look me in the eye. My chest tightened. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Yeah, you mentioned that, but you didn't say anything about going with Tom." Her hands froze mid-reach, the tension between us thickening like the calm before a storm. She sighed, finally meeting my gaze, her eyes sharp. "Bradley, not this again. I told you, it's just a party, and Tom's only giving me a ride. It's no big deal." "No big deal," I scoffed, unable to stop the bitterness from seeping into my voice. "You're going to a party with another man, Daphne. You know exactly what this looks like." Her jaw clenched, and she stepped back, slipping her purse over her shoulder, as if that was her final word. "You're being paranoid. I'm not doing anything wrong." Something snapped inside me at that moment. The months, maybe even years, of growing distance between us surfacing all at once. I grabbed her wrist gently but firmly, forcing her to stop. "Don't walk out that door, Daphne. If you go with him tonight, you're choosing him over me. You're choosing this over us." She pulled her hand away, her eyes narrowing. "Bradley, this is ridiculous. You can't control me. I'm going, whether you like it or not." The cold finality in her voice sent a chill down my spine. I could feel my grip on our marriage slipping like sand through my fingers, but I couldn't stop it. I was losing her, and the worst part, maybe she'd already made up her mind long before tonight. "You think this is about control," I whispered, my voice breaking. "This is about respect. About trust. You're throwing all of that away for one night." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the frustration boiling behind her eyes. But there was something else too. Something harder. Indifference. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't wait up," she said, turning on her heel and walking out the door without a second glance. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the empty house, and I stood there, frozen in place. I had given her an ultimatum, and she had made her choice. I didn't wait for her that night. Instead, I spent hours pacing the living room, trying to make sense of everything. When morning came, the decision was clear. She had crossed a line that I couldn't forgive. I had no place left here. By the time Daphne came home the next morning, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed, I was gone. The bed was neatly made, my clothes and personal belongings packed. I didn't leave a note or a phone call. I didn't know her that. She had made her choice. Now, I was making mine. Castle Rock, Colorado, far enough from my past to feel like I could breathe again. The mountains in the distance, the crisp morning air, and the quiet streets seemed to offer the promise of something I had forgotten existed. Peace. After driving for hours without a destination, my truck had rolled into this small town, and something about it made me stop. I rented a modest apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much. 2 rooms, a worn-out couch, and a creaky floorboard near the window. But it was mine. No memories of Daphne lingering in the corners, no arguments, no haunting traces of what could have been. The first few days were strange. Waking up without the weight of her presence beside me, without the tension that had quietly suffocated us. I'd become so used to it that absence felt like a kind of freedom I didn't know I craved. I started applying for jobs in construction, the one constant in my life that never failed me. One afternoon, while I was browsing through listings at a local coffee shop, the barista, a woman with warm eyes and a kind smile, leaned over the counter. "You new around here?" she asked, her voice carrying the hint of curiosity. "Yeah, just passing through," I replied, though I knew I wasn't going anywhere. She tilted her head slightly. "Passing through, huh? Well, you've been coming here every day for a week. Seems like you might be staying longer than you think." I couldn't help but chuckle at her observation. "Guess I'm just trying to figure things out. Starting over." She smiled knowingly, sliding a fresh cup of coffee toward me. "We all need that at some point. Name's Sarah, by the way." "Bradley," I said, taking the coffee and nodding in thanks. It wasn't much, but that simple exchange made me feel a little more grounded. This place, these people, they didn't know anything about me or what I'd left behind. And that was a relief. A week later, I got a job with a local contractor named Jack. He was older, rugged, with a no-nonsense attitude and a reputation for being tough but fair. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't volunteer any details about my life before Castle Rock. We understood each other through the rhythm of work, hammering nails into wood and laying the foundations of other people's homes, while I tried to rebuild the ruins of my own life. "You any good with drywall?" Jack asked one morning, eyeing me from across the job site. "Better than most," I said, wiping the sweat from my brow. He grunted in approval, tossing me a pair of gloves. "Good. Finish up that room, then we'll talk about the rest." The work was hard, but it was honest. It kept my mind off Daphne, off the betrayal, off everything that had led me to this point. Every wall I built felt like another layer between me and the pain I'd left behind. In the evenings, I'd sit on my small balcony, the cool mountain air a welcome change from the suffocating heat of the memories I tried to escape. I thought about calling my old friends, maybe even my brother, but every time I picked up the phone, I put it back down. I wasn't ready to talk about what had happened. Hell, I wasn't even sure if I could. One night, after a particularly long day on the job, I sat in my chair, nursing a beer and watching the sun sink behind the mountains. My phone buzzed on the table, startling me. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. "Bradley." A soft voice came through the line, one I hadn't expected to hear again so soon. It was Daphne. My heart clenched at the sound of her name, but I forced myself to remain calm. "How did you get this number?" "I hired a private detective," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I had to find you, Bradley. We need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. So she had found me, even out here in the middle of nowhere. But what could she possibly say now that would make a difference? "We have nothing to talk about, Daphne. You made your choice, remember?" "Please," she pleaded, "just give me a chance to explain." But I couldn't. Not now, not after all this time. I had made a new life here, one without her, and I wasn't going back. "No," I said firmly. "It's too late for explanations." I ended the call before she could say anything else, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of finality. This was my life now. I was starting over. And this time, I wasn't looking back. Weeks passed, and life in Castle Rock began to settle into an unspoken rhythm. The work, the quiet evenings, the isolation. I'd grown used to it. It gave me the distance I needed from everything, from her. But just as I started to feel the weight of Daphne's memory lift, the world found a way to remind me that you can't outrun the past forever. It was late, just after sunset. I'd come home from the site, exhausted, with a six-pack of beer under my arm. The mountain air, cool and sharp, blew through the open window, and I was ready to collapse into my usual spot on the balcony, stare out into the dark, and let the silence lull me to sleep. I had just sat down when I heard it. A knock on the door. At first, I thought it was my imagination. No one came to visit me here. I hadn't made any friends, and I liked it that way. But the knock came again, louder this time. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. Reluctantly, I pushed myself up, crossed the small apartment, and pulled open the door. Standing on the doorstep, wearing a look I recognized all too well, was Daphne. I stared at her, my mouth dry, my pulse pounding in my ears. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, and she stood there trembling like a ghost from another life. She was different now, fragile in a way I hadn't seen before. "Daphne," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, her eyes searching mine for something. Perhaps for the man who once would have pulled her into his arms without hesitation. But that man was gone. "I had to come," she whispered. "I had to see you. You wouldn't let me explain over the phone. You wouldn't give me a chance to fix this." I stepped back, letting the door swing open wider, though every fiber of me screamed to slam it shut. Part of me wanted to throw her out, but another part, very deep, needed to know why. Maybe it was closure, or maybe it was just curiosity, but I couldn't send her away. Not yet. She walked in slowly, hesitantly, like she wasn't sure if she belonged here. And truthfully, she didn't. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "All right, you found me. What do you want, Daphne?" She turned to face me, her eyes brimming with tears. "You have no idea how much I regret everything that happened." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall, keeping my distance. Regret? Now, after all this time? Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath. "I wasn't in control that night, Bradley. She stopped, swallowing back a sob. "I was drugged with intoxicating substances. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't cheat on you. Not willingly." I blinked, the words hanging in the air between us. Drugged with intoxicating substances. It didn't make sense. I wanted to laugh, to tell her it was too little, too late, but something in her eyes, she wasn't lying. But that didn't erase the months of pain, the betrayal, the way she had destroyed everything we built. "Daphne, whether you were intoxicating substances or not, you still made choices. You still went to that party with him, even when you knew how I felt. You still lied, kept secrets." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the anger from rising again. "It's not just about what happened that night. It's everything." She took a step closer, desperation etched in her face. I know I messed up, but I didn't mean for any of it to happen. Bradley, please. I've been living in hell every day since you left. You've got to believe me." I shook my head. "I'm not sure I can. You broke something between us. And I've moved on, Daphne. I'm not the man you knew." Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might fall apart completely. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered, "but I can't lose you. Not like this." There was a time when hearing those words from her would have shattered me. But now, all I felt was an empty, dull ache. I had built something new for myself in this small town, and I wasn't about to let the past unravel it. "I'm sorry, Daphne," I said, my voice steady, final. "But you already lost me." She stared at me, wide-eyed, like she hadn't expected the words to be so final. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out the door. I stood there, the echo of her footsteps fading, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger or regret. Just a hollow sense of relief. The door clicked shut behind Daphne, and for a moment, I stood in silence, staring at the space where she had just been. I could still hear her words echoing in my mind. "I was with intoxicating substances. I didn't cheat on you. Not willingly." Part of me wanted to believe her, but the scars of betrayal ran deep, and forgiveness seemed like a foreign concept. Still, her confession nagged at me. Could it be true? And if it was, had I built my life on a lie? I sank into the chair by the window, staring out into the dark. My mind was spinning. I thought I had left it all behind, but Daphne had ripped open old wounds with just a few words. As much as I wanted to let go, something in me couldn't. The phone rang, cutting through my thoughts. I reached for it, half expecting it to be Daphne again, desperate for another chance to plead her case. But it wasn't. "Bradley, it's me, Callum." The familiar voice of my old friend broke through. He had been one of the few who knew about my move to Castle Rock. "Callum, what's going on?" I asked, trying to shake off the weight of the conversation I just had. "Listen, man." His voice lowered. "Serious. I've been doing some digging. You remember that private investigator Daphne hired to find you?" I leaned forward, heart racing. "What about him? He's not just some run-of-the-mill guy. He's been in some pretty shady stuff. I don't know how Daphne found him, but I wouldn't trust anything that comes through him." "Shady stuff? Like what?" I asked, suddenly feeling a sense of unease. Callum sighed on the other end. "He's been involved in setting people up. Dirty tactics. With intoxicating substances women at parties to make it look like they were cheating. There's a pattern, Brad." My blood ran cold. Everything Daphne had said earlier came flooding back with a sickening clarity. Could it really be true? Could I have been punishing her for something she hadn't even done? "You're telling me she was set up?" My voice cracked as I said the words, still barely able to grasp the enormity of the revelation. "That's exactly what I'm saying. I got in touch with one of the women he tried to frame. Same story. She thought she cheated on her fiancé until it all came out. Turns out, she had been with intoxicating substances too." Callum paused. "I think Daphne's telling the truth, Bradley." I fell back into the chair, the room spinning around me. All this time, I had been convinced of her guilt, convinced that she had chosen to betray me. But if what Callum was saying was true, then none of it had been real. Daphne hadn't cheated. She had been a victim, just like I had been. "I don't know what to say," I muttered, rubbing my temples as if I could force the chaos in my mind to quiet down. I spent years hating her for something she didn't do. "I get it," Callum said softly. "It's a lot to take in, but you need to think about what you're going to do next." I didn't know what to do next. Everything I thought I knew had just been turned upside down. The bitterness I had carried for so long, the anger, it was all built on a lie. But even if Daphne hadn't willingly betrayed me, it didn't erase the pain we had both endured. "Thanks for telling me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I hung up the phone without responding, my mind reeling. The revelation weighed heavily on me. I had to make a choice. Either I confronted this new reality, or I stayed locked in the past. I spent the entire night pacing the living room, Daphne's words and Callum's revelation gnawing at my conscience. The morning light seeped through the blinds, casting soft rays on the worn-out couch. I hadn't slept. I couldn't. Daphne. Her tearful face flashed in my mind again, followed by Callum's words. "She didn't cheat on you willingly." It felt like I had been living in a nightmare, punishing her for something that never truly happened. But the wounds were still real. The betrayal, whether she intended it or not, had still broken me. Could I forgive her? Could I undo all the years of resentment? The pain, the distance. The knock on the door startled me. For a moment, I thought it was Daphne again, coming back for one final attempt. But when I opened it, it was Callum standing there, his face filled with concern. "Brad," he said, walking in without an invitation. "You okay?" I shrugged, too tired to explain the storm inside me. "I don't know, Callum. I don't know anything anymore." He gave me a sympathetic nod. "I get it. Look, I don't blame you for being torn up about this, but you can't keep running. Not from her, not from yourself. You need to make a decision." I don't know if I can, I admitted, collapsing onto the couch. Even if what you said is true, even if she didn't cheat, everything's already broken. I can't go back to how things were. I ran a hand through my hair, my mind a mess of emotions. Was I ready to forgive? Or was I just too tired to keep fighting? I don't know if I can forgive her, Callum, I muttered. Even if she didn't mean to cheat, it still happened. Our trust, it's gone. Callum leaned forward, his eyes intense. Maybe so, but that doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering what could have been. You've built a new life here. Don't let this ghost from your past haunt you forever. I nodded slowly, absorbing his words. He was right again. This wasn't just about Daphne. It was about me. I had to make a choice, one way or another, and let the past go. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking down the path that led to the park, the one where I used to go when I needed to think. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I walked, my thoughts heavy. Daphne's face kept flashing in my mind. Her apology, her tears, her desperation. The life we had shared, once filled with so much love, now reduced to memories of pain and betrayal. But maybe, just maybe, I had been holding on to that pain for too long. I took a deep breath, pulling my phone from my pocket, and stared at it for what felt like an eternity. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I dialed her number. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice hesitant. "Bradley, I've thought about what you said," I began, my voice calm but strained. "And I believe you." There was silence on the other end, and I could practically feel her holding her breath. But that doesn't change what happened. The trust is gone, Daphne, and no matter how much we want to fix it, I don't think we can. Her voice trembled. "Bradley, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. If I could take it back, I would." "I know you would," I said softly, the weight of my decision sinking in. "But we can't go back. I need to move on. And so do you." Tears choked her words. "So, that's it. After everything, it's really over." I hesitated, my heart aching. "Yes, Daphne, it's over." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Goodbye, Bradley." "Goodbye, Daphne," I said, my throat tight. The call ended, and I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. The finality of it washed over me, but instead of sadness, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was done. I had made my decision. And for the first time in years, I felt free.